Hey, now welcome to the show, where the wind's blowing strong and the truth can flow. This is the good oil. Catch a vibe today with Cam Slater leading us all the way from the heart of the nation.
Welcome to episode 19 of the Good Oil podcast. Simon Anderson.
Good morning, Cam. Bloody good to be here.
I woke you up early though, didn't I?
You did a little bit.
Why don't you tell us a little bit about who Simon Anderson is, what you do for a crust, what you do for fun, and educate the listeners. I mean, a lot of people online who follow you on X know who you are, but this has got a wider audience than X, so...
It probably does. Well, I describe myself normally in fairly disparaging terms as just a dumbass with a camera. Because that's what most people know me for, is getting out and about and filming bits and pieces of footage, and from time to time I've caught things that are interesting both domestically and internationally. Professionally, I work in an esoteric field of technology called enterprise architecture, but I've just, as a hobby, started getting out and about and filming things, which is how I came to a little bit of prominence, and since then I've diverged a little bit into doing some things like podcasting, nowhere near as elaborate as you, but it's something that I enjoy doing every week.
You said that you've had a couple of your videos go quite ballistic. One of those was the Posey Parker event, where pretty much all the footage and the shots that are shown of Posey Parker came from you. Unattributed by many media outlets, I've got to point out, but
yeah, that's true. Internationally, that's kind of my fault. I at the start, when I started publishing footage, I had friends who were saying to me, "Look, you don't want to be in front of this. You just want to let the footage tell the story and stay away from it." So I got.
Is that your mates telling you you're ugly?
Oh, well, there's that as well, yeah.
Right.
I regularly get told, if you're ever going to stand for public office, make sure that you're wearing a paper bag over your head.
Right.
So, yeah, that's kind of thing.
Well,
but
Christopher Luxon got elected, and you've got hair. So.
Yes, well, that's true.
Helen Clark got elected.
Yeah.
And she's a double bagger for sure.
So, no, it was the case at the start. So I was fielding media inquiries from organisations like Al Jazeera, Fox News, Sky in the UK, GB News, places like that, and I just refused any sort of contact. I didn't exert copyright over any of that material, and of course now, kicking back 2 years later, and more than 100 million people have watched it. So
100 million people.
More than 100 million, yeah.
You gave better coverage and truer coverage of the Posey Parker event than the mainstream media.
That's very true, and it was very much exposing how the media narrative and the official narrative from the establishment was completely erroneous. Like, we had all of the media, all of the political class swearing black and blue that it was a celebration of rainbow joy, and that it was a peaceful protest. And this was repeated day after day. It just was the song that the entire choir of the establishment was singing.
And are still singing.
And are still singing
that. I mean, my girlfriend, Kirsty, was in the middle of that, right up close to where the action was, and she described it as frightening. They just surged forward through the barricades. The police just stood aside, watched it all happen, and it turned into violence. Men punching women, basically.
Well, that's a succinct analysis. I would say it was premeditated political violence, with which the New Zealand police absolutely were complicit with. They aided and abetted it. There was a really good comment around about that time from a friend of yours, from Chris Trotter. He was interviewed by Sean Plunkett, and he made the comment, look, it's really difficult to maintain these narratives when there's some guy with a drone showing the footage of what actually happened. Of course, it wasn't a drone, the camera that I was using.
Yeah, you just had one on a pole, didn't
Just
you?
on a pole, but
Yeah.
it's a similar sort of effect. And I thought that was insightful. And it was, and in hindsight, I'm kind of glad that I stayed out of the limelight there and just published footage.
You
and
just let the footage speak for itself.
Exactly.
It's the same thing that Harvey Umini does. He just lets the footage speak. And it showed up that the tranny mob were just basically violent men that wanted to beat on women. And that's one of the things that I used to mock that crowd, is I just say that they're the good old-fashioned misogynists just wearing a skirt.
Yes. But they have their allies, right? Like you had the trade unions, the
Party.
the Green Party. They were all there.
Police.
The police. I say to people, look, there's three main issues in society, which are just simply vehicles that left-wing extremists endeavour to use to achieve social change. One of those is climate. One of those is gender issues and sexuality issues, and the other is race issues.
And now we've got the Palestinian issue.
And the Palestinian issue as well. It's another one.
I'll tell you what, it's funny watching all of the pro-Palestine people now saying, "Oh no, we don't. That's not a peace plan that we can agree with. No, we don't like that. They hope that Hamas rejects it." Hang on a second. You were talking about genocide a few days ago. You keep on banging on about genocide, even though the facts show that it isn't. If you wanted to stop the genocide, wouldn't you sign the peace agreement?
Well, certainly I try to stay away from Middle East issues because it seems to be just such a nightmare all around. But it seems to me anything that brings the killing to an end should be grasped by all right-thinking people.
Well, I mean, the answer to that, any question about the killing, is, well, if October 7 hadn't happened, would the killing have happened subsequently? The answer is no. The last time there was a full-on shooting war, and that sort of was 2014, and I know that it was in 2014 because I was there, right? So it's a whole, almost 10 years later that it broke out again. And if there isn't a lasting peace, if Hamas is not removed from power in Gaza and sent elsewhere to live, then in 10 years' time it's going to happen again. So, I know you don't touch on those things, but I do. You do. How do you see the media landscape moving forward?
Well,
what does it look like now? Because I've been involved in doing what I'm doing for 20 years, as you know, as you're at the 20-year celebration.
that was a good night.
A lot has changed, but a lot of things haven't changed. So I'm interested in your point of view. Where do you think things are heading?
Well, I think it's wonderful having followed your career. When the early days of the independent media in this country, it was guys like you and David Farrer providing an alternative perspective on your blogs that one couldn't get from the mainstream media, what I like to call the vestigial media, but also more in-depth coverage of events where a newspaper article might cover the same material. It was nowhere near, they just scratched the surface, whereas you guys really did get in underneath the hood of a lot of stories, and it was often the case that you were leveraging personal relationships to tell stories that weren't otherwise being told, which is fantastic.
If you look at the Len Brown story that I broke, it became a me versus the media story in the end, where some journalists in particular, and David Fisher's one of those, they were hell-bent on not necessarily supporting Len Brown, but they wanted to get me because I dared to publish something that they thought they had the right to publish. And they were going out of their way to track down who my source was. They were going out of their way to track down a whole lot of things to get about me, to make me the story rather than Len Brown the story. And they've continued that ever since. That was in 2013, I think. And they've carried on doing that all the time. The media, mainstream media, the legacy media, have this willingness to run agendas, and at the same time they point the finger at people like me and they say, "Oh, you're running an agenda." Look in the mirrors, pal. Stand in front of a mirror and say you're not running an agenda, because they are.
Well, that's right. And they're also they tend to be very, very territorial about it all. They look at a guy like you and think, that's advertising dollars that we are not receiving. There are eyeballs there that are tuning in to watch Cam Slater. That truly belongs to us. And there are traditional journalists who feel like that, and who I respect. And there's very few journalists in this country that I think are respectable, but there are some.
I think 2 is the number that I come to.
right. But
Not one of whom spoke at my event.
Indeed,
Yeah.
indeed. But even the good ones sort of because their industry is dying, they can see it, and they see new media as a real threat to that.
See, TV is, everybody used to watch, or not everybody, political tragics like myself used to watch, The Nation and Q&A and whatever guys they've been over the last 20 years. Their audiences have dwindled so badly that the numbers don't even match my lunchtime, the numbers I get by lunchtime. And the long-form podcasts, like I'm running, and other people like Dom Harvey are running, they are getting more and more eyeballs, because when we haven't got an axe to grind. I'm just sitting here talking to a bloke who knows some stuff about things, and people like that. They like to see politicians not so much in a gotcha situation like Jack Tame tries to set up every time, or whoever they used to have on The Nation. It was always a gotcha. It was like 15 minutes of a politician, and they'd machine gun 20 questions at them and then go, "Thanks very much for your time." It was pointless and irrelevant, and you often didn't get anything revealed. You sit down a politician for an hour and a half or 2 hours or 3 hours, very few of them can make it past 20 minutes without having to start telling the truth. And that's where the podcast format wins, because you can't hide. In an hour and a half, you are going to reveal something about yourself that you perhaps might not want to. And it's not a gotcha moment, it's a human moment. And that's what people have lost with the way the media has these talking head shots, over Zoom or someone in the studio. They're in and out in 5 minutes. What do we learn from it? Absolutely nothing.
That's true, and this speaks to the genius of David Seymour taking his own film crew to do things, to be like interviewed by Television New Zealand. So he's preventing them from creating edited sound bites that cast him in a particular light by having all of the material to say, "Look, here is the whole conversation."
I mean, Donald Trump did that in the last election, and that was how he was able to sue a major television network for editing the interview that they had poorly. He was able to say, "Well, here's my footage. This is what actually went down. This is what you put out. That's defamation," and they paid him out tens of millions of dollars. Avi Yemeni did that too. When he went to do a podcast with somebody, he set up a camera to record it, so that when the guy put out the podcast and it was all edited to hell, Avi would say, "Well, here's the real podcast," and put it out. And that's what you can do.
Yeah, it's a great approach. But I have a slightly different approach with when I have people on my weekly podcast. The best episodes that I do on my Sunday show is when I have someone come in to interview. And it's not really an interview, it's more a convivial conversation. And my approach is I want to give them the opportunity to put their best foot forward. So I try to make it as convivial as possible and positive as possible, and give them the latitude to express themselves as they choose.
Yeah, it's the right approach, in my opinion. I think that if you're machine gunning somebody and you're out to get them, and that's your stick, well, that's okay. You can do that, but don't expect to have any glorious insights about that person that you're interviewing. It's about the guest. It's not about the host.
I agree.
Yeah.
I agree. The other difference about like the secret sauce for what I do, which is quite different, is that it's participatory, because there's a live audience and they're engaging with it. I'm going out across 7, 8, or 9 different social media platforms concurrently, and the audience can enter comments into the chat. They come up on screen so that people can see them across the platforms, and I address them. So there is that sort of two-way communication live between me and whoever I'm speaking with on camera and with the audience. And I think that that participatory nature is particularly appealing, because there are a lot of people out there, I think, that feel that via the established media channels, it's not only not representing their perspectives, it's also not giving the general public a voice.
And that's I think that people are finding with mainstream media or legacy media, vestigial media as you call them, is that they're not seeing their views reflected in those outlets. If you look at stuff, they just will not have anything that is contradictory of the agreed narrative around climate change, for example. Now that's not that's not journalism. That's not listening to your audience. That's actually ignoring your audience. They actually say it out loud on their website, and they've had multiple pieces by their online editor that we're not entering into a discussion about climate change. It is happening, it is real, and we're not having any of these nutters. You know, they're basically calling people nutters. It's like Sean Plunkett calling people cookers, right? That he doesn't agree with. He calls them cookers. Well, Sean, every time you call someone a cooker, you're losing listeners.
Oh, that's true.
You don't need
That's
to
true.
be derogatory. Let them speak, and if they're foolish and are not on top of their facts or can't produce any evidence, then their words will hang them. You don't need to hang them. You know, you don't need to kick the stool out.
That's true. One of the things there that I find really amazing with Stuff's position there on the anthropogenic climate issue is the reams of information that organisations like them and the BBC have created to rationalise and justify that, right? Because the first thing that journalists learn at journalist schools is to get two different perspectives, and the justifications to not do that in the special instant cases of things like transgender ideology or climate change are just massive, to rationalise how they can still maintain journalistic integrity but only tell one side of the story. And a good example of this comes to us this week from the Australian Human Rights Commission, equivalent to the one that we have here under the new Human Rights Commissioner, Stephen Rainbow, where they have presented to the Australian Parliament how any counter-argument to anthropogenic climate change should be criminalised as misinformation and disinformation.
It's ridiculous.
It's astonishing, isn't it?
I mean, the dishonesty of journalists, if people actually could see that dishonesty, and it's always isolated cases, you just don't see it. And TVNZ's finding out about that right now in a trial where they've, allegedly defamed tallies. And, I've got a person who's sitting in court giving me information each day, and he's saying this isn't going well for TVNZ. They look like they're driving an agenda, where one of the, even one of the sources in this case has been on the stand and admitted that she was careless and reckless and stupid, and that's how she got her hand caught in the machinery. So,
yes. Yes.
There's also, I look at my own personal, interactions with mainstream media, in particular the New Zealand Herald and David Fisher. He would email me a set of questions, because I never speak to him directly. I say I don't even say it. He knows that I'm not going to speak to him directly. I'm not going to answer his phone calls. So he either texts me or he emails me. He says, we'll be going to print soon. And if I then look at the Herald website, there's the story that's about me. The last liner says, we've contacted Mr. Slater for comment at the bottom line, which is a thin veneer of journalistic integrity. And then you look at the timestamp of the article, and it was posted 10 minutes before he sent me the email. I've got multiple cases of it.
That's great.
It's just ridiculous, the lengths that they'll go to appear to be acting in a fair and reasonable manner. I never reply to them. If I do, it's usually filled with expletives. I can remember one appearance in court that I had, and Lisa Owen was chasing me down the street. Now, she had hired a guy to set me up to try and get me convicted, and there she was making the news. she was working hand in glove with this guy that had ratted on me, and she was outside the district court. Well, it was on the hearing was like at 2:00, and they filmed me going in, and it was at the Manukau District Court, and they were waiting outside because they weren't allowed to film inside the court buildings. They were waiting for me outside, but I could see them outside because there's an area that you can go up into an upstairs courtroom and you can look down on them. I thought, I've got an afternoon to kill, so I sat there until 5:15, and then the security guard says, "Oh, come on, mate, you've got to go now." And I said, "Sweet." So I knew that it wasn't going to be on the 6:00 news that night because we were in South Auckland. Right, it's
Yes.
quarter past 5. It's going to take them an hour to get back into the town, so it wasn't going to be on the 6:00 news. But every word that came out of my mouth was an expletive. And when they did finally hear the story, there's me and Lisa Owen walking side by side, and there's no audio.
No audio. That's great.
So I always say to people when they ask me for media advice, what happens if the Herald calls? Just hang up. You don't have to speak to them. You don't have to answer their questions. They don't have to do anything. Just hang up. It's not, if they're calling you, it's not good news.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
Yeah, and then I also say to them, any news is good good news, even if it's bad news. They're still getting your name out there.
Well, that's true too. But we've seen that over the last week. I think that there was an awful lot of outrage with the Herald's new piece on Tory whānau and Golders Garraman, where they're looking to rehabilitate their reputation somewhat. You can see the agenda. It's all being driven out of the
It's
PR
greenwashing
agency.
them.
It is.
And or brownwashing them. That's what they're trying to do. They're trying to make it look like they're victims. Right? But nobody pinched that gear except for Golders. Right? She's the one who put it in her bag. She's the one who walked out of the shop, and she did it for shits and giggles. And now she's crying, going, I feel shame. Good. Should feel shame. Right?
Yes, well, she claims to feel shame.
I don't believe it for
No,
a second.
I'm not sure that she does. But I messaged someone I know at the Herald and said, "Oh, look, I watched this episode. I'm really looking forward to next week's interview with Alina Ceausescu." It was just like that.
But then you've got people like Bryce Edwards, who's all of a sudden become a corruption campaigner because he's paid to do it, right? And that's not corrupt at all. Have we heard even a shred of condemnation from Bryce Edwards about Chloe Swarbrick flying to the UK on the dime of the Insurance Council while she's supposedly a climate warrior in business class?
Yes.
Yeah,
yes.
Like he complains about federated farmers putting people into parliament, or federated farmers lobbying this, or somebody at Taxpayers Union lobbying that, the Atlas Network. He whines and whines and whines about that, and we've got a clear case of
Nepotism.
Well, nepotism, coziness. Chris Farfoy is the spokesperson for the Insurance Council, former Labour minister, paying for airfares for politicians to go to the UK to find out about insurance. Pretty sure we could have done that on a Zoom call. But no, silence from Bryce Edwards.
Well, I'm quite disappointed with Dr. Edwards. I had thought, I've never met the man, but I'd thought that he was one of those more sort of thoughtful, old school kind of class leftists, a sort of a Chris Trotter type, but a little bit more academic.
I used to think that too.
But he has blotted his copybook, I think, a little bit in that regard.
Well, especially when you read the trust deed for the trust that's
Yes.
providing the funding, which lists how they're going to go about running stings on MPs and ministers and lobbyists, with secret recordings and things. It's all there in black and white. And he's trying to be whiter than white by saying, "I'm against corruption." Hang on a second, mate. You weren't against corruption until someone paid you to be against corruption. Does that make you corrupt? But he won't answer those questions.
Which is a shame, really, and I think that he said, because he will have sacrificed a great deal of academic credibility with the release of those documents, but because, as you say, they're damning. There's no academic integrity in going into a project like that with an agenda like that. So my heart goes out to him to a degree that he's sort of. I suspect, not knowing the man, that he might be regretting selling his soul to the devil in that regard.
I don't think he's very bright. I like Bryce. I've met him many times. always had a convivial, constructive conversation with him. But when it was revealed about the trust deed, he went on the platform with Sean Plunkett and just attacked me and said, oh, well, he's a dirty politics player and all of that. And it's like, mate, that was fucking 11 years ago. Get off your high horse. Like, no one cares. And that was his answer to facts being presented that showed that he had an ulterior motive, and the organisation, ironically called the Integrity Institute, had an ulterior motive, and that was to get people they politically don't agree with. That's it. That's basically the summary of it. It's like when you see a country that its name is the Democratic Republic of such and such, right?
Yes,
it's not.
Yes, yes.
There's no democracy at all there.
No, no, indeed, that does tend to flow.
Or the People's Republic.
Yes, yes, that's very true.
No, it's true. I mean, there are people, they're the ones with the guns, and the ordinary people, they're the ones without the guns. But Posey Parker, just go back to that for a second. Posey Parker highlighted for me the start of, or maybe not the start, the revealing of a two-tier policing environment that seems to have followed along slowly behind what's happening in the UK, where you've got institutions like the police or other organisations. You've got media institutions running a two-tier platform. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think that's very true, and I think it's something that does need to be addressed. I think that what is quite disconcerting is that the Posey Parker event was a watershed moment here in New Zealand. That it really did. It what's the common parlance? It woke people up. There's a term that they use for that. It peaked. That's the term. It peaked a lot of people. Hang on a second. The media is telling me that this was all love, peace, and happiness. Chloe Swarbrick is telling me this.
Peace, love, and mung beans. None
all
of
of that sort of stuff. But here I'm seeing on the internet this footage
men beating up women,
of men beating up women, and the police aiding and abetting it. And so there was that change. But I think the institutional change that ought to have followed, that hasn't happened. There hasn't been anything like accountability within the authorities. There hasn't been anything like public sector, rather government oversight to say, hang on a second here, there's a cultural problem here with our law enforcement that needs to be addressed, and we're not seeing that at all. And a good example of that is, if you remember the work that the Free Speech Union did 12 months ago, exposing the training that police were expected to complete frontline police personnel, which was absolute just left-wing dogma, trying to introduce circumvent Parliament to introduce and enforce laws that don't actually exist in this country. And this is a really significant thing. When we have police absolutely off the reservation trying to enforce laws that don't actually exist, that's a real problem in a liberal democracy.
I mean, we're seeing it in the UK, people being arrested. One guy was being called by the police in the UK because he posted the letter N.
Oh, I saw that.
The letter N. Oh, no, we're calling you about your concerning post on Twitter, on X. I posted the letter N. How's that concerning? Well, we need to talk to you about that. It's like, the guy on X, Nobody, who got the Thought Police come round and raid him because, in the police's own words, they said he hasn't said anything illegal. It's awful but lawful. And I wouldn't even consider it awful. He's telling jokes on X, and he gets the police come around and grab his firearms and grab everything else because someone had hurty feelings. This is ridiculous. I mean, since when did sticks and stones will break my bones cease being relevant? That's what we were taught at school. If you came home and you said, "Oh, Mum, this guy called me a name," a sensible mother would go, "Don't worry about it. He's a dick." Right? But no, now it's, oh no, it's bullying and it's this and it's that and it's everything else. But, sticks and stones will break my bones, but names will never hurt me, has has never ceased being true.
No, it's served the test of time, Cam.
Yeah.
Very true.
So those snitches get stitches.
That's true.
But see, that's what Ardern, you could just tell, imagine what she was like at school. She would have sat up the front and she would have snitched on all her classmates and been the teacher's pet. And when she became the Prime Minister, what did first thing she do? She set up a snitch line so people could dob in their neighbours after she told them not to talk to their neighbours. You know, she never went to a school where you got a hiding if you snitched.
No, I don't think that happened at Morrinsville High School.
I wasn't even sure Morrinsville had a high school.
No.
But there seems to be no accountability, though, in the public sector.
There really doesn't, and it's across the board. Like we're seeing this with an activist judiciary. We're seeing it with the Law Commission giving advice on making gender identity a protected characteristic, while the rest of the world is moving very, very far away from that. We're seeing Una Jagos trying to unilaterally introduce racial apartheid in sentencing, saying, okay, judges, you need to be taking in the ethnicity of an offender when you are sentencing. All of these sorts of things, and which are really significant, have a significant impact upon life in a liberal democracy that once upon a time we would have expected to see some accountability.
No, the law was the law.
The law was the law.
But when you see it, I mean, if you're a firearms owner, you see this all the time from the police. And I've got multiple personal instances where the police just rock up and make stuff up. You know, they come and knock on your door, we've come to inspect your safe. Well, did you make an appointment? No. We'll go away. But a lot of people are frightened. The police turn up on their doorstep with tasers and Glocks and, you know, vests on and say they want to inspect your safe. They go, oh, come right in, and invite them in. Oh, under the law, they don't have to. Right? The police have to make an appointment. Now, if you're a collector, it's a little bit different. But people are not aware of the law. And the amount of times I've had to point out to the police what the law is when dealing with me, and I insist that you comply with the laws that you're supposed to enforce, they get really shitty. It was only a few weeks ago that I had an incident with the police where they had unilaterally decided to do something about my addresses and the address situation. And I pointed out to them that the law, the way it is written, and I quoted they actually quoted the law at me, and I quoted it back to them. And I said,
"Of course, you did.
It's not an either option. It's a this or this or this, and it can be all three. And it's even on their forms that you fill out when you change your address." And they ummed and ahed for 2 or 3 weeks, and then finally came back and said, well, we've made a decision at this point in time that your current situation is okay. I said, of course it's okay. It's following the law. You know, I've had multiple instances where the police just make it up. You know, they're pulling over people outside of gun clubs, and they say, oh, could we inspect your firearms? Then how you're transporting them. The answer should be no. You have to give me notice. They do. They have to give 7 days notice of an inspection. And the law is very clear on this, that a car is treated the same as a house. Right? So they can't just pull you over and then go on a look-see based on an invitation from you to say, sure, have a look. So I get pulled over by the police outside a gun club. I say, no, give me notice.
But you're right, that does get a negative reaction because, as you say, here in New Zealand, most New Zealanders don't know their rights when they're dealing with law enforcement. And when you do, the police here are just so used to compliance that when they get any sort of resistance,
they overreact.
They absolutely overreact. There's a very, very negative reaction to it.
It's like that young lass who goes to the Palestinian protests and holds up the Israeli flag, and they want to arrest her. Why? She's holding a flag. The others are holding a flag. You know, they go, oh, you're inciting it. Come on. You know, but that's what the police do. They pick on the weakest and they make stuff up. And then later on, they're forced to apologise. But after tens of thousands of dollars and lawyers being involved, that's what happens.
It's true. And her name is Lucy Rogers, and she has a case going through the courts. at the moment. And I've seen some of the background information from it, and just the corruption from the police in that regard was really just quite astonishing. But they are vindictive as well. So Lucy Rogers, because she was very much by herself.
She's a lawyer too. So.
She's a lawyer as well herself.
So she knows the law.
She does know the law, but she didn't have a platform. So she came to me and said, look, there's some video footage of this happening to me. Can you help me out? And I published that for her, as I did for Nob Oddy. And that makes me a target, right? So because there have been multiple instances since Posey Parker where I've used what little platform I have to expose what I think is a wrong, has not endeared me at all to the establishment, and certainly not the New Zealand police, who are looking, as I'm sure they do with you, who are looking for anything that they can possibly use
all the time
to shut me down.
I went to a gun auction, and the guy who was running the auction, about 4 or 5 hours into the auction, I went over and something had got passed in, and I was the highest bidder, and I thought, actually, I will meet the reserve on that. So I went and spoke to him, and he said, oh, who are you? Told him my name. He says, oh, the police are looking for you. I said, oh, really? Which police? He said, oh, the ones who are here. I said, okay, thanks for that. So I went into the police who were there doing all the registrations, and I said, okay, which one of you guys has got a mouth like a torn sack, breached my privacy? What? I said, I've just been told you're looking for me. Here I am. Are you looking for me? Oh, in 10 minutes of fuck around, looking at screens and stuff like, oh, no, we don't want to look at you. We don't. But you know what I did is I went back home and I put in a Privacy Act request for the QID numbers and the times and the dates of when when police officers looked at my account. You know what I found? In the space of 3 months, there were more than 200 lookups or access to my NIA file by police. All right? So people in the police are going in looking at their intelligence system for shits and giggles.
Yeah, so that's a campaign against you personally.
Yeah, they're looking for any breach. But what I've found with police is that be the squeaky wheel. Be the annoying rattle that's in the car that you can never find, right? Because they don't want to touch you. If you're loud and you're out there, I've even got an email that I got under the Official Information Act when a constable was saying to his sergeant in an email, oh, we'll go round and rattle his cage. Right? They actually said it out loud in an email. And the sergeant replies, are you retarded? Right? Do you want to be front page news?
Yes, I think I remember reading this a while back, 8 or 9 years ago on your blog.
That's right. Yeah.
Oh, that was just sensational.
That's when someone tried to swat me. That's when they ring up and say something's happening and he's got firearms and then the police turn up armed, which they did. But I didn't let them into the house. I talked to them through the screen door, and had to, again, explain the law to them. So, but, when I did the Official Information Act request and the Privacy Act request, that's what I found. So there's people out there who want to rattle my cage. Well, I've just found that being annoying and being persistent and constantly referring to the law is the most important thing that you can do, because it becomes too hard for them to deal with you, and so they stop.
Sound advice. But I think looking at it from
you have to be brave to do that.
You have to be. And you have to know the law and have a good barrister, all of that sort of stuff. But looking at it from a sort of a broader social perspective, I think that the Pelian principle that the New Zealand police seem to have forgotten is that it's policing by consent. And in this country, so few people are prepared to cooperate with the police, the cooperation that they have relied upon for generations, right? The people grew up thinking, okay, you can trust a police officer, they need something, you help them, they're there, they're trying to do good. And lots of people, I'm sure, go into the job doing good. But there is an issue there, and they've lost public trust, and they need to re-establish it. And how you do that is that you show accountability. And I have an instance which comes to us this week from across the Tasman, which proves the point, where you would have seen that that there was a lot of comment in the Australian media about how Jacinta Allen, the Premier for Victoria, was under massive pressure about rising crime rates in Victoria. Particularly, they have a problem with a young youngsters who come from places like Sudan, joining gangs, committing awful violent crimes, and so on and so forth. And one of these had happened, and she was at a press conference under hard questioning, and the new 3 to 6 months in the job chief of police there is Mike Bush, who used to be the commissioner here in New Zealand, and he jumped in and interrupted the questions and insulated her from media scrutiny. And the media in Australia made that point. It's like, why is the police commissioner intervening to protect a politician?
That's what he did in New Zealand.
And that's right. And for every Kiwi, it was like, well, this is Mike Bush. That's his job. That is it. New Zealanders were not surprised. We know that Mike Bush was a political appointee whose job it was. His number one priority was insulating politicians from any sort of scrutiny.
And he was the commissioner that broke the law.
Yes.
They had a legal opinion that the lockdowns were illegal. He knew that. He told the Prime Minister that, and they did it anyway. And then when it was me who released the information that said it was illegal, I gave it to Barry Soper and he ran it as well. Well, we were, derided, we were abused, we were told that don't be silly, it's perfectly legal. And one brave guy took it to court and proved that, yes, the first lockdown was illegal. Well, what happens to your public confidence in your institutions when you've got a government and the police who are supposed to uphold the law, willfully breaking the law because they use the greater good argument? Well, we all know now from experience from around the world that lockdowns did nothing. So there was no greater good. And yet we're seeing the judiciary still continuing to validate banning of doctors and various different people, even though they told the truth. And the truth has been revealed constantly, and yet the courts and the police and everybody else and all of the institutions still go along with the narrative that it was okay to do all of this because COVID.
Right, and this is the path to tyranny, when the democratic institutions that we've always relied upon to be the checks and balances are not functioning, or
we
worse,
was
are
the
colluding.
Human Rights Commission in all of this. Not a peep, not a word, not a mutter, not a murmur. They said nothing. When everybody's rights were being trodden on with jackboots, with gay abandon by Jacinda Ardern and her cronies.
Yeah, very true. And she wasn't alone. There were a lot of people helping her out. The circumstance that particularly grates me is the 9 Kiwis who were prosecuted for entering New Zealand, who had what they'd worked out they could do is they could
book a transit flight.
Book a transit flight and not take the second leg and just enter their own country, as they're entitled to do. Now, the police prosecuted 9 people for that, and no one from the police has ever been held accountable for prosecuting Kiwis for the non-crime of entering their own country. Also, there was a judge overseeing each one of those convictions. No judge has been disciplined for that, lost their job, or, in point of fact, prosecuted for that, which is, it's a heinous offence, right? Like a fundamental right for any New Zealand citizen is to enter their own country. And yet we have this apparatus of state, from police and law enforcement through to the Department of Immigration, to an actual sitting judge overseeing that iniquity. And this erodes the democratic principles of our society.
I put that down to a lot of the blame for that actually goes back to Geoffrey Palmer, because he brought in the Bill of Rights Act, but he never made the Bill of Rights Act the supreme law, where it sits over all other law. It was a nice to have. And so you've got ministers of the Crown and various different governments who say, well, yes, look, this bill that we're bringing through the Parliament breaches the Bill of Rights Act. But that's okay, because
we can just set it aside.
We can just set it. There's a greater good here, or whatever. And that's where you get the degradation of the rule of law, when inalienable rights are just trod on over by politicians, by police, and by institutions.
You're exactly right, Cam.
Which brings us to digital ID.
Oh, it does too. Wow. Isn't it astonishing how coordinated this is across the Western world? It's just all coming
at the same time.
All at the same time.
just amazing, isn't it? Maybe it's a coincidence.
Maybe it's a coincidence that all of these WEF-aligned politicians are all introducing digital ID.
Yeah, the next step from digital ID is social credit systems.
It is indeed. It is, and I've written about this over the years because I'm familiar with the technology from my professional background. This is I can't stress enough to your listeners just how crucial it is to resist this stuff. Like, as soon as digital ID is introduced, that is it. Our democracy is finished. We will no longer have any civil liberties anywhere in the Western world. It is the greatest threat to our civilization.
The people don't understand it. They think, oh, it's just going to be like an electronic driver's license that I can carry on my phone. This is the bizarre thing. David Seymour, I think it was, and I think it was Simeon Brown and Chris Bishop came out and they said, look, a lot of people don't carry their driver's license because it's an inconvenience, but they've all got a phone. I said, it's a legal requirement to carry your driver's license when you're driving. It's in the law. It's a thin piece of plastic. How is that more inconvenient to carry than a cell phone? It's a ridiculous argument, and nobody ever pushes back and says, oh, come on, is that the best you come up with? Like, you've got an army of spin doctors and you've got these plans to put this in, and that's your rationale? Fuck off. Where is the journalist saying, fuck off? This isn't real. That's not a real answer. Nobody says fuck off anymore.
Indeed.
It's like the whole trans argument and pronouns and all that, where they insist that we entertain their delusion, right? That we have to support their delusion, that they're a cat or a dog or whatever, right? Call yourself what you want, but don't ask me to do it. Couldn't care less.
Yes, I shouldn't have to participate.
Yeah, I'm not playing. I'm not playing your silly games. And they go, oh, you're dead naming me and all sorts of crap like that. Fuck off. So, just go away. Why doesn't anybody say that? New Zealanders are their own worst enemy. They want to go along to get along.
That's very true, and our political class very much relies upon that innate Kiwi apathy. So you take examples like the conversion therapy bill, the gender self-ID bill, that have been hugely contentious overseas. It cost Nicola Sturgeon, First Minister of Scotland, her job, all of that stuff. Here in New Zealand, it just went through on the nod. Labour and the Greens promoted it. ACT, New Zealand, National Party, not New Zealand First, all just voted it through 11 o'clock at night, and no big deal, no harm, no foul. We're seeing this with digital ID. We're getting Erica Stanford on one side saying, won't someone think of the children? Talking about how if we introduce digital ID...
Yeah, that's what parents are supposed to do.
Yes, that's what parents are supposed to do.
Yeah, stop looking at their porn. Whack.
Yep. And then we've got the convenience argument, as you've rightly said, and this is one that they're pushing through in Australia. That's the two avenues of convincing people, is convenience and please won't someone think of the children. The United Kingdom is an outlier. United Kingdom, the argument there is, look, if we introduce digital ID...
We can stop immigration.
We can stop the boat. It's just... this is just nonsense.
You can just imagine, there's the rubber boat that's just come across the channel. There's your customs officer. Have you got your digital ID on you? No?
Yeah,
Oh, well, hop off back on the boat.
Yes.
Fuck off.
Yeah,
it's not an argument.
It is not, and it's complete nonsense. But in the United Kingdom, we're seeing this, right? Like, the way it works in the United Kingdom is if a parliamentary petition reaches 100,000 signatures, it must be debated in Parliament. And they got to 2.4 million in about 36 hours. So it's a hugely contentious issue there, and it's not here.
No, it's going to come here, though. Like, this is what people don't understand, right? We see all these things happening in the US, we see it happening in the UK, and people go, oh, it's not happening here, so we don't need to worry about it, right? And so they just let it slide. But it is happening here, and it is coming here. George W. Bush said to my father in about 2003, said, oh, John, where it's all at the moment in the US is people are sidestepping the mainstream media and they're going directly to blogs, and you're seeing the rise of like the Drudge Report and things like that. And you need to, if your political party's doing anything properly, you need to get bloggers on side, right? I started my blog in 2005. And that was part of my thinking on that. Now, originally I was aligned with the National Party. Now I'm aligned with nobody. And I've got Nicky Hager to thank for that, which is fantastic. It means I can hit them all with equal derision.
That's the way to go.
I get people to say, "Oh, Cam, you should do this because it's better for the National Party." So, well, what do they do for me? Nothing. And even if they did, and that was the problem, right? Is that I wouldn't do what I was told. I mean, I had one of the Prime Minister's staff in 2014 ring me up and say, the boss isn't happy with you publishing that. I said, "Oh, we'll get the boss to ring me then." He goes, "Oh no, I'm passing on the message." I said, "I don't talk to monkeys, I talk to the organ grinder."
That's a good answer. But it's the same greater good argument that your frontline police officers are faced with. It's the same thing. It's like, okay, well, this is not good for the party. Okay, it's not great, but let's resolve it internally. This is the line we're taking on it. No.
Resolve it in public.
Yep.
People say, you're criticising David Seymour, or you're criticising Christopher Luxon. Well, they deserve criticism.
Absolutely.
And where it's due. I criticise Winston Peters where it's due. Up until recently, he's been kind of colourblind on the issues around Israel. He's the foreign minister. Why have we got an embassy for Israel in Ankara, Turkey? Right? Because we don't want to upset people. Who? Right? The Israelis would love to have our embassy in Jerusalem. Oh no, we couldn't do that. But I think I think that's changed, given his announcement on the weekend.
I think this is one of the cultural differences between right and left in this country, is that on the right of the political spectrum, people like you are prepared to address issues with equanimity and say, okay, well, while I might support this party in principle, in this instance they're wrong, or this person's not measuring up, and you're prepared to criticise them. Conversely, like you will never hear a left-wing voice offer anything other than full-throated praise for a Jacinda Ardern, for Chloe Swarbrick, for Marama Davidson. It just is not done because of the sort of groupthink and this greater good.
It's a cult of personality.
Yes.
We're running short on time. Let's just cover off where we think the election's going to go next year, and where the state of the parties are. We'll go from most popular to least popular. So let's start with Labour, because they're the most popular given the polls at the moment. Fuck knows why, but
it just is astonishing. Well, it's kind of by default, right? Like you've got to be pretty bad as a government to come in after the devastation of the Ardern regime and be so awful that people are actually prepared to go back to what they experienced so recently. So they're kind of winning by default, giving a small target by not releasing a whole bunch of policy. I see they've released a little bit of policy over the last, 48 hours, 72 hours.
Yes, the only policy they've released, which is to hug Hamas.
Yes.
They care more about Palestinians than they care about Kiwis.
Yes, they do indeed. So, look, I think what I'm hoping for, I think National have blotted their copybook awfully. I don't think Nicola Willis has been anything like the finance minister.
Doesn't she sound like she's scolding you?
She does. She does. Just miserable.
She's got this horrible voice. People can't, I guess they can't change that. It's what they're born with. But she has this way of speaking that you sound like a naughty 4-year-old being told off.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
And that's why I call her a scold. And it sounds horrible and nasty, but that's the way I feel every time she opens her mouth. She's also got that annoying head tilt that Jacinda Ardern used to have. Maybe they've read a book or somebody said to them, "I'll tilt your head and look a bit sad and people will go along with you." Well, I'm immune to that shit. It might work for others, but I just don't see Nicola Willis as being any sort of a leader.
Nor do I. And the proof is in the pudding of the numbers, right? Like you look at New Zealand's performance economically, while the rest of the world has moved on and recovered from the COVID years, New Zealand is still languishing far behind. So when you are the finance minister, it's there in 2-column accounting, black and white, or in her case, black and red.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. But again, Christopher Luxon, he was voted in on the basis of what we want to change, right? And have we had any change? I haven't seen any change. He just looks like a bald Jacinda.
He does. Well, you're exactly right. He was elected on a wave to be the antidote of Adernism, but what he's proved to be is the continuation of it. And what I would like to see, what I think many people on the right would like to see, is for National to be punished for that, for them to become a minor party in the coalition with New Zealand First and ACT. And I've been saying this to my listeners for about 6 months, that there is a precedent for this, that if you look at the centre-right parties of the major democracies around the world that have been the natural party of government since the end of World War II, the Republicans in France, the Conservatives in England, the CDU in Germany, all three of those are now just absolutely devastated by their shells, because they went moderate, they tried to move left to absorb the ovary window, not Overton the ovary window, by appealing to left-wing younger women.
Well, you look at the top levels of the National Party. Look at the top three. So we've got Christopher Luxon, Nicola Willis and Chris Bishop. All three are wetter than an otter's pocket. Right? They walk around in a puddle of their own making. That's how wet and woke they are. And it's unappealing to voters. The change that's happened in the United States, the change that's afoot in the UK, we run about 5 years behind. That's the point I was making before about George W. Bush. He was talking about blogs in 2002, 2003. It wasn't until about 2010 that blogs started to take off in New Zealand. And it's the same thing with podcasts. Joe Rogan's been going for years. We're only just now seeing a wave of podcasting that's happening in New Zealand. So we run 5 years behind. So the issues that Christopher Bishop and Nicola Willis and Christopher Luxon are arguing over are things that have been put down like a sick dog in around the rest of the world. They're still crapping on about it. I mean, Pete Hegseth came out this morning and he said, I'm sick of walking around the Pentagon and looking at fat generals right now. From now on, they're going to have to, twice a year, they're going to have to meet the age and the weight criteria. And he's saying, no, it's just embarrassing. You've got Donald Trump's doing the same thing. The woke ideology is dying, and we're seeing this now rising in the US universities, where young people were flocking to, Turning Point. They were flocking to Charlie Kirk and what he was saying because it made sense. And finally, after all these years of nonsensical upside downness that we've been told is real, along came somebody who said it's not real, and it's okay to say it's not real. And you got this huge wave. Well, that's happening here in New Zealand too. And unless the National Party wakes up to that, well, then ACT and New Zealand First are going to harvest those Conservative votes all day long.
I think.
And Winston's really doing well at it.
He is. He's doing very well. Well, that man is making an awful lot of sense. It'd be good to see a few more government bills that he's arranged around the cabinet table rather than members' bills. But all of those bills are right on, and they are reflecting the sentiment of the majority of Kiwis.
Hipkin's problem is his partners. He's got the racists of the Maori Party and the insane batshit crazy Greens who, basically the Green constituency are women in the leafy suburbs. That's basically it. If you take those away, they don't have a constituency.
That's true.
So it's all these morons who think, won't we think of the children for the future? And they're voting in communists and Marxists.
Yeah, well, they're being exploited in that regard, and I ripped that off, that term, the ovary window, from the podcast of the Lotus Eaters. But it's really true. We have a real issue in New Zealand where women under the age of 50 are overwhelmingly supporting far left parties. The more women in that age group support Green and Labour than all other parties put together by a significant margin. And
it's insane rationale too. Oh no, I'm going to vote for Jacinda Ardern because she's a woman. Well, but she's thick. She hasn't got if she was given another brain cell, it'd be lonely. I mean, if brains were dynamite, she couldn't blow her nose. I had lunch with her for 3 hours in the 2008 election campaign, and I came away with that. Right, I was with David Farrer, and I said, "What do you think?" He said, "Oh, she's wonderful." I said, "Were you looking at her tits or something?" Like, she didn't say anything that was sensible the whole 3 hours we were there. It was all just a collection of bumper sticker slogans. You know, what you can say in 8 words. That's Jacinda Ardern. And I've maintained that ever since I met her. And I wasn't wrong.
You were not wrong. But, well, lots of Kiwis were.
Well, a lot. You know, that's why I always say COVID was an intelligence test.
Oh, yeah, I certainly failed that.
I didn't. Well, it's been a bit of a rush job this morning, but we got there.
Yeah, fantastic. Well, thanks for having me on.
It's fantastic to have you, Simon, and I'm sure that a lot more people now will be following you on X as a result.
Yeah, which is great. Like I'm getting about sort of 3,000 to 4,000 people tuning into my Sunday show these days, which is good.
Tell me about Mont Blancs.
Oh, about Mont Blanc. Well, fountain pens in general. Well,
Yeah.
you've got some Mont Blanc pens.
I've got somewhere.
You do?
When I was a sales rep, I found that if I had a Mont Blanc pen, I got more sales.
Right.
In IT, I was in IT as well, right? People,
Right, wow.
People don't realise the body language, right? When you go into a sales meeting with somebody, the first thing that somebody does when they meet you and they shake your hand, if they're a bloke, is they look down at your feet and see if you've got clean shoes on.
They do.
Right? So clean shoes, very important. Next thing they do is signs of, is this guy any good? So the easiest sign is a Mont Blanc pen in your pocket. And you can see that distinctive little white mark on the top. And then they're sitting there going, okay, this guy knows how to sell. And then they look at your watch.
And then they look at the watch. That's
Yeah.
right. That's right.
And from then on, right, if they don't rate you, they ain't going to listen to you. And it makes your job harder as a salesperson if they're not listening to you. So a Mont Blanc pen was a signal for me, right? And it was a sales tool. I would finish my pitch and everything, you know, what do you think about that? And then I'd say nothing. The next thing I'd do is take my pen out, twist it so the nib was showing, put it on the contract, push it over to them and sit there and wait. The next person who speaks loses. And it was never me.
All right. Fantastic.
So you've got a fascination with Mont Blanc, so a quick wrap up on that.
Okay, all right. For your audience, my 2-hour show on Sundays is quite eclectic. I talk about culture, international relations, politics, so on and so forth.
And Mont Blanc pens.
And fountain pens
Yes.
in general. And it's a segment that I do that people watch because I think it's just funny watching someone like me go on in excruciating detail.
About Mont Blanc green. Or
And yeah, this is
green
this
number
colour.
47,
Yeah.
whatever it is.
Oh, look at the nib on this.
Yeah.
And oh, isn't this a lovely colour? So yeah, inks and pens. But I'm going to stop doing it. I've pretty much gone through my entire pen collection
Why don't you
now.
just do a separate podcast on Mont Blanc pens?
Oh, I could do.
Yeah.
But I don't think people will tune in for it. Like
I would think you'd be surprised.
maybe.
You know, people have little niches that they like. You know, there's views in that, and those views can be monetized,
Yeah, true.
including from Mont Blanc, and they've got moonbeams.
They do.
Yeah. Thanks, Simon, so much. It's been a real pleasure.
Thank you for having me on. It's always good to see you.
Hey, now welcome to the show, where the wind's blowing strong and the truth can flow. This is the good oil, catch a vibe today, with Cam Slater leading us all the way.